Everyone's just in a great mood. It's good to see. Glad to see everybody. I'll call the meeting to order, and I'd like a motion and a second to grant a leave of absence to Commissioner Lamb, who's out of town. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. And I'd like a motion and a second for approval of the minutes of the regular commission meeting of January 8, 2025.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Meade. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Good morning, Mr. Executive Director.
Good morning, Madam President and Commissioners and volume. Great packed crowd today. Welcome, everybody. Really nice to see you. Happy Black History Month. Really nice. I know we're going to have a bit of recognition and celebration here shortly. I'd also like to welcome our crew of new employees. Nice to see you all. It's been 11 or 12 minutes since we've seen each other last. Great to have you here. Commissioners, as you know, we have such a rich and diverse set of employees, and welcoming a new crew, it is always fun to see where folks come from, the new perspectives they bring to us. So it's just a great bunch. And somehow I evaded question time again by running out of time this morning. So apologies. You just know it's really hard to get me to do Q&A time. If we could go to the next slide, I'd like to start by recognizing safety champions, Karen Barr and Eric and Corrine and Jose. Jose out on the dredge. We just have a bunch of great employees engaging on their own safety, the safety of their colleagues and our business partners. Maintenance and marine security also represented here. Just want to give a shout out to all of them again for watching out for everyone. And for a safety moment today, we're breaking the tradition because I'm going to take it to make an announcement, really, to let you know that 2024 was the safest year in the port's 135-year history. Pretty amazing. Thank you, Steve, our head of safety back there. Show me your hand, Steve. And his team are here as well. Thank you. An astonishing effort over a number of years to really improve on our safety. And it was 9 recordable incidents for the port as a whole, 9 at the airport in the entire year, far and away our best year ever. So just really outstanding. Vince, at T-Corps, we're over 5 million, 6 million worker hours without a lost time incident.
Last year there was 0 lost.
So we're 21 months without a lost time incident. So really the team is up here. Just again, thanks to them and the leverage they bring to safety really is not their responsibility, but they're really guides for us. And I'm just really proud of the team and the entire port staff for getting us there. It's been just incredible. I'll note that one of the things that's really improved over time is reporting. Reporting when you see something, when something happens, when someone's injured. We'd like to know about that so that we can improve on it in the future. So it's something that is really important to me, and I'm just really pleased, commissioners, to be able to make that announcement. 1891. Port became the Port of Portland, and the best year ever. So just really great. A lot in the news about tariffs. There's not a lot to report today, but I did want to let you know that we're paying close attention. In particular, Kimberly and her team are thinking about the impact on the movement of goods through port properties. The 10% tariffs on China will likely not have a huge impact on us in the short term, but it will impact our business partners and folks who are trading in and out of port facilities. I'll just say, as a general rule, and the port team has heard me say this too many times, tariffs are not good for the state of Oregon. We are the 5th or 6th, depending on what you count, most trade-dependent state in the union. Our commerce with international markets on ag products in particular, but on semiconductors, on apparel, on Oregon manufactured goods, on timber products is really important to job creation and family wage jobs in the state of Oregon. Generally, traded sector jobs pay about 10% more than the same job outside the traded sector. So it's just a really important issue for us, and we'll be paying close attention. On to some airport news. Many of you have been asking about Clear and when will we get Clear? The answer is last week. We finally do have Clear in the airport. It's up and running. To use the Clear lines, you have to have a membership in Clear, but really excited after a few years of trying to work out how it would be present in PDX. We're to that point now. Also really excited to note Alaska Air, the leadership team from Alaska was here last week. Dan and I got to have a nice chat with Ben Minicucci, the CEO. They are just really bullish about PDX, and they are focusing on growth beginning this summer, 132 daily flights. We expect to see more and more Alaska flights here, including some banks. So flights that come from smaller airports regionally and come to us to end up somewhere else. So really excited about that. And the partnership with Alaska continues to be just outstanding. I had, I think, my best LinkedIn post ever, says the guy who has a quarterly post to LinkedIn. We have new wood maps and markers inside the terminal core to show where the wood in the building comes from. It's just a really exciting addition and recognition of the community-based, family-owned, tribal-owned lands that contributed wood to the project. And these 14 markers essentially point out those sites around the terminal core and show you not only where the wood is and where it came from, but also uses the language of the 4 contributing tribal partners to describe that wood. It's just really wonderful. So you see Yakima, Coquille, Skokomish, and Cow Creek tribal work and contributions in the terminal. Also recognition to the artist Carson Ellis, who helped us with that work. Really excited about it. 2 things finally, Madam President. First, I know the Port family was really disturbed and saddened for the folks around the airline incidents in the last month, in particular in Washington, D.C. I'll just say thanks again to our operations team and our police and fire and safety folks who are really focused on travel safety. It is frightening and I'll say encouraging to see our own team focused on safety every day. And I'll just say our hearts go out to the folks who've experienced loss in several communities around the U.S. here in the last month. And then finally, we've been working, as I think commissioners, you know, for the last 7 or 8 months on a renewal of our strategic plan. We'll be rolling that work out here in the coming month. The executive team and I are sitting down with our senior leaders later this week to talk about what that looks like and what next steps look like. I'm just really excited for the frame of the strategic plan this time, which is around people, place, and purpose. And I really appreciate all of your engagement in that work. We're just really excited to move on to the next step. So with that, Madam President, thank you for the little extra time this morning.
Thank you. Thank you, Curtis. Any questions, comments? I just want to add my congratulations to the Port for the safety record and recording the best year ever. It was not quite a year ago when the commission was talking to staff about potentially delaying the opening of the first phase of the airport opening with concerns around safety. And the commission was 100% behind doing that. The right decision obviously was made. No one is talking about the fact that the airport was delayed opening for 3 months, and we have this terrific priority and focus on safety, and the record shows it. So excellent job to everyone. Kudos. Can I have a motion and a second for approval of the executive director's report? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Grace. Moving on to public comment, we do have one individual that signed up for public comment, and you'll have to correct me if I pronounce your last name wrong. Jamal Dare, African Youth Community Organization. Welcome, yeah, Jamal. Please come on up, and we want to make sure that one of the microphones is, the button is on the microphone. You can push it to get a green light. And welcome to the Port.
Thank you. Congratulations, Commissioner President. This is a huge accomplishment. We want to congratulate to your leadership and to everything that you have done in the Port of Portland. It's beautiful. It's one of those days that you feel, yes, I live in Portland, Oregon, and this is my hometown. Have you seen our new airports? One thing we're missing. My name is Jamal Dar, Executive Director in African Youth and Community Organization. I'm the founder of the organization, but I also work for corporate American Nike for 25 years. One of the things I'm always champion and work hard for it is to provide what the Muslim communities are wanted based on their spiritual, religion, culture, and anything that they request. And with my 25 years at Nike, I was able to accomplish 2 praying area at the Nike headquarters. And I'm very proud to say that with many Muslim communities working for the corporate, we were able to accomplish that. One thing we're missing in our beautiful airport, and I know that phase 1 is already being complete. So we're requesting today, if you could please include the next phase, which is phase 2, for praying area for the Muslim community, in both women and men. In our Dream Center, some of the staff here has been seen in our staff, our Dream Center at the Southeast 82nd. We already acquired praying area at the center, at the Dream Center, our organization. And we definitely love to see that in our airports. As you know, there's many airports in the United States, including Seattle, Washington, and Tacoma, who has those praying area. They will make us very proud. As you know, there's over 20,000 Muslim communities live in the Portland metro area, and there's over 30,000 that travelers in our airport. That would be something that would be truly appreciated, and that's something that I would definitely want to be able to be part of that. I would be happy to share any idea, any comments, and how do we develop our organizations behind that vision and support, as well as so many Muslim community in the Portland metro area. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Dar. All right. As Curtis mentioned, it is Black History Month, great month, and we have 2 individuals here to make a presentation. And again, please correct me with any mispronunciations of last names. Ismail Warsam and Sharanda Curtis. Please come forward. Welcome.
Good morning, commissioners, staff, and community members. My name is Ismail Warsame. I'm a senior risk analyst here at the Port of Portland, and I manage the Port's enterprise risk management, as well as business continuity plans. My role involves in strategic planning, risk assessments, and cross-departmental collaborations to build resilience and safeguard our business functions.
And I'm Sharonda Curtis. I work on the terminal landside operations team. I work on a team with some great individuals. We make sure the airport is in compliance, it runs smoothly, safely, and get everyone where they needs to go. Also make sure each department in the port and all the tenants, make sure everyone is supported. We are both members of the ERG Alliance for Black Employees, ABLE, and we appreciate the opportunity to take a few moments to recognize Black History Month 2025. Each year, a national theme is chosen to highlight a key aspect of Black history and contributions. The 2025 theme, African Americans and Labor, explores the profound ways in which work, whether free or unfree, skilled or unskilled, emotional, vocational, or voluntary, has shaped the collective experience of a Black people throughout history.
While we won't have time to share about every organization that's doing amazing work locally today, we would like to uplift a few community organizations and coalitions that operate at the intersection of Port's mission, labor, and economic mobility of Black communities in Portland and beyond. In our communities, we often talk about the importance of honoring our elders. Therefore, it is important that to start with a few of the organizations that built the foundation of our local advocacy work. Starting with the NAACP, the Portland chapter, established in 1914, the Portland branch of the NAACP is one of the oldest on the West Coast, followed by the Urban League of Portland, founded in 1945. Also, the Scanner Foundation, founded in 1975 by Bernie and Bobby Foster. The Scanner News has been a powerful voice in media for Black communities in Portland and the Pacific Northwest. The Black Fund of Oregon, since its founding in 1983, B4 has been committed to investing in education, leadership development, and economic opportunities for Black and underrepresented communities.
These next organizations are strongly aligned with our vision of shared prosperity. African Youth and Community Organization, ACO. ACO plays a vital role in workforce readiness, youth mentorship, and economic integration. Many of the families ACO serves are part of the port border ecosystem, whether as workers in ground transportation, airport services, or trade industries. Our work in regional economic development aligns with ACO's mission to empower young people and prepare them for career opportunities, including those in entrepreneurship, aviation, maritime, and transportation industries. Black Business Association of Oregon, a key partner in advancing Black entrepreneurship by helping business owners navigate barriers to growth, access capital, and secure contracts in industries where Black representation has historically been low. The Port's Mentor Protege program and small business development initiatives directly align with the mission, ensuring disadvantaged businesses have the resources and opportunities to participate in public sector projects, including those at the Port. Last but not least, the Albina Vision Trust. Centered around Portland's historically Black community in the Albina neighborhood, AVT represents the largest restorative community redevelopment plan in the country. In their own words, the work intentionally connects place, wealth, joy, and culture, transforming what we build, how we build, and who we build it for.
Other impactful organizations also include Freedom Foundation. Freedom is at the forefront of land access and agricultural equity for Black farmers in Oregon. Taking Ownership PDX, restoring and preserving Black home ownership in Portland. Equitable Giving Circle, addressing economic disparities through direct financial support and resources. IRCO's Africa House, also providing culturally specific services to African immigrants and refugee communities. Imagine Black playing a critical role in shaping public policies that promote economic justice and workforce equity. And last but not least, Micro Enterprises Services of Oregon actively supports underrepresented community entrepreneurs and small businesses in Oregon and Southwest Washington.
Thank you to the commission for having us today. Thank you to all the beautiful people that came and supported us today. And we ask you to join us in expressing gratitude to these organizations and the individuals moving their work forward and to make Black history every day. Thank you for allowing us to share today, and we look forward to continuing this work together. Thank you.
Thank you both. Any commissioners have any comments? Good morning, Christina. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you. Good morning, commissioners and President Koba. I'm Christina Kelchner, Chief Development Services Officer here at the Port. This is a general discussion item, and the purpose of today's item is to give you really an overview of our capital improvement planning process here at the Port. So as commissioners, you give us important strategic input through weighing in on our strategic plan and some of our larger facility plans, like a master plan, PDX master plan that's in the process of being updated now, as well as weighing in on the executive director's annual priority. So that's important strategic direction for us. Then as a commission, you see larger projects when they come to you when you sit as the Port's contract review board and review and approve contracts over $2 million. So what we want to do today is to give you a sense of the process that staff goes through before to plan and develop those projects before they come to you in the form of larger contracts. And I'm going to turn it over to the team to do that, but I wanted to give you three main takeaways that you can listen for in our presentation. The first one is that our capital improvement program really is one of the most significant opportunities that we have to advance our strategic goals. And that's certainly true when we're investing in new assets or expanding capacity of our existing assets, but it's also true when we're just taking care of what we already have. When we plan for investments in our existing facilities, we are really intentional about making sure that we're taking the opportunity to leverage those investments to reduce our environmental impact, to advance equity and shared prosperity, and to make our facilities more resilient against natural disasters and climate impacts. The second takeaway is that we do have a robust process, an established process, a governance process for our capital planning to help ensure that our capital portfolio meets our strategic goals and is also aligned with long-term financial targets, which you'll hear more about in this presentation. And then finally, I just want to say that our program is data-driven. We have an established process for assessing and monitoring and always knowing the condition of our facilities. That's all stored in the database. We are always looking at technology that will help us do more with that data and create some efficiencies. So there's some technology investments we could make there. But we do have an established process and regular testing and monitoring protocols, and that data really forms the heart of our asset management program. So with that, I'm going to invite Sean Loughran, our Director of Planning and Development, and Travis George, our Capital Finance Manager, up to give you the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Good morning, commissioners. Thanks for the opportunity to get to do this. Might surprise you, but I don't always get asked to talk about the capital program. You know, the capital program for us, it is really the product of more than a decade of work. And I got to give a shout out to Stan Waters, who I worked with before Christina took over this program. And it was something that he worked on and was passionate about for a very long time. And I think pretty much the entire executive team has a role in this capital program. Where we're at today in that capital program, certainly a long ways from where we were 10 years ago. But it's not where we aspire to be. And we're very much committed to continuous improvement. And we're always looking for opportunities to improve that program. What I get to share is a very brief overview of what is a really complex program. And it's a program that really is the sum of many parts. And it really is representative of the efforts across the organization of all the different groups that we get to work with. Planning and development gets the unique responsibility of bringing all those sources of expertise into focus. And we do it in a way that ensures that we're delivering the right projects at the right time in a way that delivers shared prosperity to the region, really delivers on our core values. Next slide, please. The capital improvement program, again, the port delivers critical infrastructure to the region. And we do it in a way that, as Christina mentioned, is delivering on those strategic goals that we have. It has accountability built in, that governance process that we have, and we'll talk more about it. And as Christina also mentioned, it's based on good information. We bring the best of expertise to the organization to bear, and I think it shows in the way that the projects are developed over time. Next slide. I'm going to revisit this slide again toward the end of the presentation, but what I'd like to convey here is the fact that we're talking about a process, a continuous process, not a project with a discrete beginning and an end, but something that is continuous, a process that has flexibility, the ability to respond to uncertainty. In my time working on the capital program, that means, you know, we had a great recession that we needed to adapt to. We had a financial credit crisis. We've had a pandemic. We're talking about tariffs, and we're talking about changes in federal funding. And this capital program, the way that it's built, is what equips us to be able to respond effectively to these things that we can't anticipate that come up. And that really is the great value. The top line on this, and again, I'll revisit it later, is the staff process we go through. Across the bottom are the touch points for commission that have influence from the beginning and then throughout the project, all the way to the type of things you're going to hear after me today, which is actually approving those projects that are over $2 million. Next slide, please. You know, I'd say one thing that really truly is unique about the Port's capital program is the sheer span of the types of things that we do, whether that is cranes down at Terminal 6, or it's taxiways at PDX, or it's passenger boarding bridges. It really is an incredibly expansive program. The projects fall into 3 core areas. The first, those driven by our strategic plans, our business plans, and our facilities plans. Those represent kind of those things where we're trying to build capacity, where we're trying to create business opportunity. You've heard a bit about the PDX master plan that we're working on right now. In 2011, Commission adopted the prior PDX master plan. We called it Airport Futures. That was a master plan that looked out 20 or more years and said, what do we need to do now to make sure that we've positioned ourselves for the challenges of the next 5, 10, and 20 years? And really, it was the foundation for what is PDX Next, what is TCOR. That is the work that was derived from the master plan. Asset renewal, you know, it's not the stuff that ends up on the front page of the magazine, but it is our bread and butter. Typically, it accounts for 80% of the work we do. I'd say a very large portion of it, in fact, a very large portion of it is pavement. You know, we've got a lot of pavement at the port. We maintain over 43 million square feet of pavement. And we've got a pavement management system where for every foot of that, whether it's a taxiway or it's a container storage yard, we're inventorying those. For aviation pavements, that's every 3 years. For everything else, that's every 5 years. It's helping us decide what maintenance needs to be done and when there's major projects that need to happen. The third bucket is against mandatory projects. Those could be driven by lease requirements, or those mandatory projects could be regulatory in nature. Stormwater, we have a municipal stormwater discharge permit here for PDX. Requires us to manage, treat, and discharge our stormwater. We've got a lot of pavement, like I mentioned, and so what we've done is we've proactively given thought to that process. We put together a master plan, looks out 30 years based on information derived from our master plans, takes climate information and it models what the likely needs for the stormwater will be as we develop these different projects, and then we build regional stormwater treatment. And that way it's in place before these paving projects come up, and then we draw down on those accounts over time. Again, looking at that proactive approach to managing projects. Next slide. Asset renewal, again, it is the bread and butter of what we do, major piece of our work. The foundation for that is our asset management teams. We have 33 teams across the port, brings together subject matter expertise, whether that's engineering, it's maintenance, it's mechanical, to inform our projects. It produces this comprehensive database, which it's a VFA facility. In that, you could look at that, and it has got information on when that asset was installed, what the expected life of that asset is, what the replacement cost of that asset we believe is at the time, and then it's continually updated. Those teams meet constantly. They're looking at every asset every year, and that information goes into the database, and it drives the decisions we make, and it's continually updated. Next slide. Once we've identified projects, they go to project development teams. These are those cross-functional teams where we've assigned a project development manager, and they begin to build out the scope, the schedule, the cost understanding, the sequencing of the project. How does that project relate to other projects? And we look for opportunities to advance other key programs. So we've got our environmental team, and if we look at a project and we think is an opportunity to make progress on our climate goals, it fits in. We're working with our small business, our shared prosperity teams. We're looking at resilience. Maybe we do a project and we want to be thinking about is an opportunity to make an investment that will build out our resilience program and equip us for whatever challenges that might include. We do a detailed alternatives analysis. We always, for all our projects, try to assess the consequence of delay. What if we couldn't do this project now? What would that mean? It's what equips us to have those conversations about some of the uncertainties we face. And we develop funding strategies. Most of those fall, 80% of those probably fall in our normal categories where we're looking on the aviation side at the port or the airline cost center, or we're looking at general fund. But in some cases, we look at debt financing, and we're always screening projects to see what kind of grant opportunities might be available. Next slide. And the source of all of this work is that 5-year capital plan. And it is providing us that strategic roadmap and that understanding of what we have to manage over that 5-year period. Again, it is a dynamic process. It is adaptive. It is a process that is informed by a 10-year capital planning exercise. We also do. And it's a process that is involved. It is the product of those longer term looks, looking out 20 or 30 years in our facilities plan. It's a rolling 5-year plan, and it's managed to those capital spending caps, which Travis will talk a little bit about.
Great. Next slide, please. So I just have this one slide. It'll be quick, but I wanted to give some background on the financial perspective of how we manage the capital plan. Partly because this is a broad overview of how we manage this in whole, but also because we've made some changes over the last couple of years that we want to be clear on. And really, as we were going through kind of retooling how we manage the financial side of this and coming up with the capital caps that Sean mentioned, we recognized pretty early on that we wanted to use the rating agency partners that we have as sort of a foundation of the framework that we use. And really, that's because one of the most important things that they use in their assessments of various organizations' financial health are really clear financial and other metrics. And that was something that we really hadn't specifically used in the past when coming up with the capital caps that we set. So we knew that we wanted to include specific metrics in our framework. You can see the primary metrics that we use here on the right side of the screen in the middle. I will say that the bottom one, cost per employment, obviously is an airport only metric, but the other ones really do apply to both PDX and general fund. And so what we do is every couple of years now, we actually update our financial forecast models every year, but every couple of years we do it with a new cap setting in mind for capital spending. So we run the model or the various models that we have with varying levels of these of capital spending included, and kind of narrow in on how much capital spending results in meeting the metrics and meeting the targets for these metrics that we have. The targets that we set for each one of these are some of them are very specific, some of them are more of a range, but they all generally adhere to what rating agencies and are those kind of third-party external partners would view as financially responsible. And then the last piece of this really is just that we wanted the approach to be dynamic, and we've incorporated some more flexibility in that regard into the way that we approach the capital caps. Previous caps were set specifically for, like, I think the last one was actually a 6-year cap. And the intent was to not touch it after it was set, just kind of go through the whole cap period. That ended up being not totally doable because of the pandemic, and we had to reassess those caps kind of on a reactionary basis. We wanted to build in a little bit more proactiveness into the process. So instead of that kind of 6-year set it and forget it approach, we now, as Sean mentioned, have a rolling cap. So every 2 years we'll reset it. It is a 5-year cap, but it's reassessed to every 2 years, and that just allows us to incorporate new financial information every couple of years and new realities of the capital plan and different strategic initiatives that we have. Yeah.
Question. I don't think we have any, but can you just confirm we don't have any asset-backed lending going on?
Asset-backed
Well,
lending.
meaning pledged assets. It's just it's cash flow. It's
Yes.
there are no.
They're all of our
nothing.
like bond
Yep.
like debt that we have is all secured by port revenues.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Of one kind or another.
Yeah, just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Travis. Next slide. So accountability. How do we achieve it? We achieve it through portfolio controls, and we achieve it through good governance. We talked about all these different timelines from looking 20 or 30 years out to our 10-year plan to our 5-year plan, but we're actually approving projects on an annual basis. That's our annual portfolio approval process. The portfolio governance team, that's exec team. I'd say the heavy lifting is done by the portfolio administration team. They're meeting a couple times a month. They're reviewing projects. They're making recommendations. The portfolio management team is the 2 business lines. So Kimberly and Dan overseeing that process. We have in place a gate review process that ensures smooth transitions between planning, engineering, and then construction. We have a process for managing project change requests as they come. And we produce monthly health reports so that we're continually monitoring the process throughout so that we understand early if there's an issue with a project that needs to be addressed rather than letting an issue linger until it becomes a management concern later on in the project. Next slide. That annual portfolio approval process, like I said, it really is driven by that project administration team. That project administration team is meeting on a regular basis, and they're applying criteria for how those projects get ranked. They're looking at strategic alignment. They're looking at operational impact, financial impact. They're evaluating project complexity. They're trying to understand how a project relates to other projects and what opportunities that creates or what sequencing challenges might need to be considered. Project timing is not just based on financial resources, but it's also other resource availability. Do we have the staff to actually manage the program that's proposed? It's designed to evaluate value and risk and give us that complete picture. Really, what can we deliver in any particular year? Next slide. Revisiting that process again, and I'm emphasizing that it is a process. What I've explained mostly is what are the steps that staff go through to deliver this, but I want to make sure that you've got an understanding of what the key moments are that commissioners have influence on the process. We talked a little bit about the strategic plan today. Key moment for commission to be engaged. Master plan, we're working on it. Commissioner Luther is our liaison on that, and you're going to hear a lot about the master plan because really it is that opportunity for the port and the community to talk about our collective long-term interests and set that direction. Task force, we always have chances to engage and update as we go. You're going to hear about some contracts later today. You're going to hear about buses. You're going to hear about paving at Hillsboro. You'll hear about paving projects at PDX. Those projects are the product of this process. So I hope when you look at this, you have some context so that when these projects come to you, you understand a little bit about what the process has been to bring them to this point in time. Next slide. Again, the summary, those key points, they're really the points that Christina emphasized earlier. The capital program is significant. The biggest part of that program is asset renewal. It would be easy to think that asset renewal, replacing an air handling unit isn't an opportunity to drive our policies, to really put policy into practice, but it is. And we would be missing a key opportunity if we weren't thinking about it that way. That's why we bring all voices to the table when we're making these decisions. I want you to make sure you understand that we have a rigorous process to ensure accountability of the programs and the projects that we do from beginning to end. And we bring good information to this. This is a data-driven process, and it reflects the expertise of the organization, whether that's engineering, or it's maintenance, or it's our operations staff, or it's our environmental teams. Those all fall into focus as we inform the projects and we build out the capital plan. That is my last slide.
Thank you very much. I'm sure there are a few questions. Do you want to start? Commissioner Johnson, good morning.
I can appreciate the process you guys have. It's very good to see you have a rigorous process. I love the fact that you have data-driven decision-making versus ad hoc. Just maybe a couple of tactical questions. I think they're going to be layups for you. On the pie chart slide where you had 78% of your asset renewal and you had 2% mandatory, are there no compliance mandatory components of the asset renewal pie chart?
No, there are.
Okay.
So, yeah, you would be right. So even with our pavement program, we're required to inspect all our pavements every 3 years. Those got to be maintained to the highest standard that is set by the FAA. And so while they might not fall into what we would call regulatory, the way a stormwater permit would,
Right.
They definitely are. There's a clear regulatory driver for those. So some of the things that are in that asset renewal category would have a regulatory relationship.
And
sure.
are mandatory?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, perfect. The other piece is more of a financial question. When you had the financial slide around financial responsibility, some years ago, I think publicly traded companies had a change in their GAAP principles around capital leases. Are those part of your balance sheet? And when you enter into a capital lease, is that part of what you would consider kind of the S&P global rating?
Our capital leases do show up on our balance sheet according to GAAP standards. They're not a significant portion of what we were talking about today, so they wouldn't impact our rating or the way that they don't have a significant input into how we're coming up with capital caps or what we're spending our capital dollars on.
So it's not a significant part of the capital improvement plan?
No.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. Told you there were layups.
We appreciate it. I'm a basketball fan, so I'll take all the layups I can get.
Commissioner Adams.
Gentlemen, as a new commissioner, my question to you is about volatility and uncertainty. So the plan looks great. You got great people managing it. Considering the scale of the port's budget, where are the pockets of uncertainty and volatility in the model? What are the big things that could throw off a reasoned plan that could be an important strategic issue for us?
It's a good question, and there probably are many. My team hears me say this all the time. I say uncertainty is the new normal, and resilience is the new skill. And whether it is doing a master plan or putting together the capital plan, those are some of our core interests. In my team, I also manage the resilience program. So we're looking at a whole bunch of factors that could influence the projects we do, when we do those projects, or how we do those projects. So areas of risk would be seismic risk. It could be climate risk. We've got a bunch of projects around that. And I'd say the most recent thing we're evaluating is related to financial risk. And that would be because so many of our programs are supported by federal funds, and we know there's significant change in that area. Travis's team is digging in and evaluating all those sources of grant funding. What ones are formula funds? What ones are for programs that might be newer, like bipartisan infrastructure fund, and evaluating the risk that might be associated with those. We're saying, what projects would we have to do anyhow? And how might we do those projects? And how would that require us to reshuffle the projects in the CIP to be able to make those kind of adjustments? So I'd say everything from climate or seismic risk, the financial resources that might be brought to bear. There are always changes at the airport that could relate to security. When we first built out the ticket lobby many years ago, we didn't, it was pre-9/11. We weren't anticipating the uses that would need to be accommodated. When we built out the current project, the whole idea of that big open space is to be able to adapt and adjust to meet changing requirements that we have no idea what they are today. I hope that answers your question. Some of the key.
I would also add from the financial side of things, and you mentioned some of them, but as you saw, we set capital spending limits based on financial forecasts. In any forecast, every forecast basically is going to be wrong in some way. So there's inherent risk in the forecast being significantly wrong for varying reasons, whether it's another pandemic that impacts enplanements that would impact our financial standing. But the capital dollars that we spend are real dollars that we're spending. So you saw listed first in those metrics was cash. It's I'd say the most important financial metric when it comes to how much we can afford to spend on capital projects. And so any impact outside of our control, just general world risks that could impact our financial standpoint and specifically the cash that we have, will impact how much capital spending we can afford to do, which then gets kind of shifted over to the project side, and then we have to reevaluate the priorities in order to fit within what's affordable.
I have a couple follow-ups, if that's okay. So our role is to support you in those moments of uncertainty, right, where things go sideways. Assuming that you had the support you needed I put a mint in my mouth right before I asked questions, I'm so sorry. The support you needed when the pandemic sort of landed on us. Were there moments in this capital planning process that you needed to reconnect with the commission to give you support? Where are the release valves in this system so that we can make sure that we're available to give you the support and flexibility you need?
Yeah, that's a great question, and the answer is yes. So when the pandemic, not something I expected in my career, and the impacts to our business were profound. And we, not once, but twice, had to go back and defer projects. We had to go back to that capital program. And one of those things we do for every project is to evaluate the consequence of delay. So we already had that information. We went back and we said, we simply are not going to have the resources to deliver the program that we believe that we need. What can we live without? And what is essential? And so we had to do that. And like I said, we didn't do it once. We did it twice. I know Curtis and the executive team had many conversations with the commission about how best to do that. And so commission was very much involved in those conversations.
And I would say, again, from the financial side, we typically are very strategic about the way that we use debt financing for projects. And we would, I think, always try not to be reactive in our use of debt. However, it's possible that circumstances could arise where we would want to consider using debt to finance some projects in a scenario that was where things were going a little sideways in some way or another. And in that case, we would need and come to the commission for support.
One last question. I assume by capital projects, they're tangible things. Is that definition plain English, or are there intangible things included in what would be defined as capital projects in this management framework?
We are talking about those tangible things. We always say, should we create a project for something Depends, are we creating a physical asset? So we really are talking about that part of what we do.
Super, thank you.
Other questions? Commissioner Sampat?
Yeah. Again, thank you for walking us through, and it's good to know that we've got a solid process, and obviously that's been clear through the various commission meetings. Two questions. First one is, as you look around the country and look at other facilities that are comparable to us, who would you consider as the benchmark that we need to measure ourselves against? And have you done that as a process? Or
Thanks. A good question. And are we benchmarking ourselves? Are we doing peer reviews? We are. I would say we're not limiting ourselves to our industry, because capital management isn't unique to airports and marine terminals. But in particular, I think Minneapolis-St. Paul MSP has been an example that we feel like they've done an excellent job. And the lessons, we get different lessons from different organizations that manage capital. So we look at a variety. We always look to our neighbor to the north, to Seattle. Again, an integrated port, we're looking at the types of things they do. They have a very sophisticated approach to managing capital. It's been a good example, but we're looking at many of those opportunities, and there's lessons we take away from all of them.
would we put ourselves at the top, or there's clearly programs that you would want to implement as a result of this benchmarking?
I would.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll have that discussion later.
I guess I would. What I would say is, and they're the people that are in the room behind me and the people that are back at their desks right now. I am continually amazed at the expertise that the port brings to bear on the projects that we do, and I believe it's second to none. And that's why our program is what it is. And so I think honestly, what we bring, we're as good as anybody else. Is there, we talk about kind of the next, the final frontier of asset management, and it's predictive maintenance. And we talked a little bit about predictive maintenance. We're not there yet. We're absolutely interested, and I think that's where we need to go.
Second question. It was really good to see the financial metrics, especially to make ourselves well prepared to access capital at good rates. There's one metric around cost per enplanement that related to Dan Pippinger's business. Are there other metrics that we have in place that relate to the key financial metrics of our business lines, as in this would result in X revenue enhancement? This is just an example. Or this would result in Y improvement in margin. Typical kind of things that you would, in any kind of capital spending, go through. Is there a set of metrics that we've developed that's specific to the health of the businesses?
I mean, I would say we're continuing to refine and develop various financial metrics. We talk about other financial metrics in terms of return on assets and other things like that. And some of those metrics don't align perfectly with a lot of the projects that Sean has talked about. Mandatory or pretty necessary pavement things don't really have a return on asset. But as we approach projects that are a little bit more developmental in nature, we do talk about other kind of performance metrics like that. And I think we will continue to build out the framework that we already have around assessing that sort of thing.
Yeah. In some future meeting would be great to understand how we can align your work, finance and treasury's work, with the business lines. Thank you.
Chair, I have one more question. When we add significant capital assets in a new terminal entrance, I assume that's a sort of like a shelf step in the maintenance plan. How do you think about that? Say more.
You know, that is a good question for our operations team, largely who we work very closely with. It is a big step. And not only is it a lot more space, we're also dealing with a substantial increase in the sophistication of some of the equipment that is being installed. The ground source system compared to the boilers, chillers, and air handlers we had before, that's new for us. It's really complicated and going to be complicated to understand. I know Dan could probably say more, but we are having conversations about the additional resources that will be required to manage the additional space and the expertise it'll take to manage the systems that we're taking on board. I don't know if I have the specifics for what you're looking for, but those are, you are right on your assumption, and it is considerably more for us.
Travis, I'm just going to make up words because I don't have the language for asking these questions, but does the duration of the capital assets in the new parts of the terminal, do they tie with the duration of the liabilities that we've taken out to finance them? Or do you think about whether there's a mismatch there, meaning will we have to replace those capital assets before we've paid off the debt?
Right. No, that's a great question. And overall, the terminal is a very long-term asset. And there are pieces within it that may have to be replaced while the debt is still outstanding. But generally, we from the debt issuance perspective, we kind of look at the whole picture, the broader asset. And it's pretty typical in the industry to issue 30-year debt when you're financing an asset of that nature. And that's what we did with this.
Is the terminal considered at a high level of 50-year asset? Like, is it beyond the duration?
Accounting question. I'm not sure about the answer.
Okay, what I'm getting
specific.
at and trying to understand is, so it's amazing to have these big projects open. They inspire the region. But from a capital asset management standpoint and a financial asset management standpoint, that's a shelf level maintenance and replacement. And, that all of a sudden creates big steps in work 20 years out when those products have to be replaced. So really interested in thinking about that. And as you take that new capital asset into the management structure, I'll be interested in the years ahead to hear you talk about how we absorb that level of responsibility and risk.
It is an area where we have a lot of work. The day we cut the ribbon is the day that becomes asset management work.
And also just wanted to point out that the project is meant to position the port well for future growth. And the pandemic kind of put a little bit of a wrench in the spokes of that for a little while, but we're back on a growth trajectory, and I think it's building for the future. So while, yeah, it is a step up in risk and cost and that sort of thing, it's a necessary one.
Commissioner Johnson.
Just one final question. So kind of adding on to Rakia's question, is there no total cost of ownership calculation for a tangible asset? Meaning when you bring the asset on board, there's a capital cost in. You talked a little bit about maybe needing some additional resources. Maybe it carries an additional power consumption with it or not. I mean, maybe it's energy efficient, but when you think about the total cost of ownership of an asset, is that part of any of the financial metrics?
We do look at each specific element that you mentioned, and to some extent compare between assets, but I wouldn't say there's quite exactly the way you described it, a total cost of ownership of this asset versus the total cost of ownership of another asset.
And I would say it wouldn't be consistently applied. We do it for some, we don't do it for all. Oftentimes we're looking at the larger projects for a big paving project or a big kind of utility related project. We're looking at life cycle costs. We're trying to understand in the total life of that, what is the expected value of that asset over time. What are the total costs? So if we're looking at concrete or we're looking at asphalt, we're doing that comparative analysis. But I don't know that we're doing total cost of ownership the way that you're describing it.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions, comments? Outstanding discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Both of you, and
Thanks.
great questions, commissioners. Thank you. All right, we've got 3 action items. Christina, are you going to do it from back there?
Great, yeah, I am. Yes,
Okay.
I will ask Jennifer and Chris to come on up. So as promised, we have 2 paving projects for you, as well as the shuttle bus replacement. So first, we're going to talk about PDX. This is a runway maintenance product, a taxiway, maintenance project. And the FAA does set the standards that we have to comply with. The FAA also helps to provide us some funding. So we work hand in hand with the FAA, looking ahead at our 5-year capital needs and planning with FAA in partnership for the funding and how to best phase that work. So with that, I will turn it over to Chris and Jennifer. So Jennifer Raby is our development manager. She was the hub and the spoke on those slides that really helps to pull together all the cross functions that are needed to weigh in on a project. And then Chris Edwards is one of our fantastic engineers. She knows all things paving and airfield, and she'll be telling you more about the nuts and bolts of the project. Thank you.
All right, next slide. So we are here today to request your approval of a public improvement contract for approximately $9.4 million to Tapani Inc. for the Taxiway A West Rehabilitation Project here at PDX. Next slide. Taxiway A is a really essential piece of infrastructure on the airfield here at PDX. As you can see, it's the only full-length taxiway that runs parallel to our north runway. So it provides a really critical connection for aircraft accessing that runway. This project is going to focus on the western end of that's highlighted in blue on the map. Next slide. You heard Sean earlier reference our pavement management program. That's a systematic approach that we take to monitoring our pavement conditions and planning our improvement projects that go into the CIP that Sean's been telling you about to keep our airfield in a good, safe condition for operation of our taxiways and runways. This project was identified through that pavement management program. So in 2025, we'll be rehabilitating the western end of Taxiway A. We have a plan to come back in 2029 and do a similar project on the eastern end of Taxiway A. One element of our pavement management program is those regular inspections that Sean referenced. And out of that information comes what we call a pavement condition index, or a PCI value, which is an industry-wide standard that ranks pavement from 0 to 100. Generally, above 70 is considered to be in good condition, and below that is an indication that we need to do some work. And so on Taxiway A, that section that we're looking at, the PCI values range from approximately 44 to 73. So that's an indication that it's time to do work on that piece of pavement. Next slide. As Christina mentioned, FAA is a really important funding partner for most of our major airfield pavement projects. Each year, we work with the staff at FAA to update our 5-year list of projects for which we anticipate receiving federal funding through the FAA's Airport Capital Improvement Program, or ACIP. The bipartisan infrastructure law provided additional federal funding through a number of grant programs, and ACIP is one of those. So for this project, we expect to receive approximately $7.8 million. That leaves the port's share at $6.6 million. Now I'm going to turn it to Chris to talk more specifically about our scope of work.
Thanks, Jennifer, and good morning. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Next slide, please. So here's a closer view of the Taxiway A West project. The contract before you today includes asphalt mill and inlay. We have full depth reconstruction. We're putting new center line and edge lights. We have storm drainage work to continue our stormwater standard, as well as widening the shoulders to 30 feet to meet FAA requirements. I would just note we worked very closely with our airside operations folks during the design in order to develop plans that would limit operational impacts during construction. Next slide. This shows the overall schedule. Item bolded on your left is that action item before you today, but you can see this summer we will be constructing this project. Next slide. Here's our overall budget and funding. Again, that contract before you today. Our personal services is for that design consultant. We do have an electrical pre-purchase. That's for long lead items. Port staff and contracted services covers such things as geotech, management, inspection, things of that nature. The contingency on this project is 10%, which is appropriate given the complexity of the project. As Jennifer noted, our funding sources are the FAA as well as the Airline Cost Center. Disadvantaged business goal was identified as 16% for this project, which our contractor achieved. Next slide. Staff requests approval of the executive director's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Nemi, good morning.
Thanks so much for this. This may be an ongoing line of questioning around that, but you were talking about the FAA and federal funding. I mean, it's no secret that there's the new administration is trying to cut a lot of federal funding. So is this funding that's already been approved, or is it also in jeopardy of being reduced to states like Oregon?
Commissioner Nemi, thank you for the question. And this is funding that we are in the process of being awarded. So to answer your question, is it in jeopardy? We don't know, but we do believe, based on the criticality of the work, particularly that this is an FAA grant, that we believe that it's low risk in terms of the funding going forward, or us losing the funding going forward. The other thing I'll say is that we are running a sensitivity analysis around what our exposure is on the grant side so that we can better understand, like Sean talked about, if we need in our process to be a little more agile and figure out how we can make an adjustment in the event that the grant money doesn't materialize and we have that exposure, we can respond to it.
Commissioner Luther.
Just a follow-up question to that related to Commissioner Nemi's question. Is there, given the environment that we're in, are there limitations about when we can draw, or is there a developing strategy, just sort of earlier is better type of strategy, so we can try to mitigate some of the, what I'll call daily uncertainty risk that we're in as it relates to funding?
Yes, definitely earlier in, but as soon as we can get to a place where we are clear on the project, we actually have bid out the project, and then we can start the work of the project and start drawing down reimbursements. The sooner we get through that process, once we've been awarded and the grant has been obligated, that puts us obviously in a better posture.
Commissioners, I might, if I could, Madam President, just take the opportunity here to maybe add a little bit more to what Antoinette described in the question that Commissioner Adams had earlier. We're in this environment. Earlier it was described as financial risk. I think of it more as political risk or policy risk. But I'll just say that the team is meeting on a regular basis about it. We will react when it comes. We will definitely try to access federal dollars as quickly as we can, always. A number of the programs that we have at the port, it's infrastructure programs that you've already approved, but it's also funding, for example, for our K-9 program inside the airport. It's taxiway funding through FAA. It's just a wide range of potential impacts. So we're going to proceed on the assumption that we'll still have access to all those dollars. If we don't, we'll have to adjust. A number of projects like this one will have to be done regardless of whether we have federal dollars or not. We hope and expect that this is a low risk one. If it doesn't receive federal funding, we would have to get into a phase of where else do we get the money? At the end of the day, that goes back to the airlines. So we'll just have to react on a case-by-case basis. I'll just assure you we're on it. Again, this is a space where you wish this wouldn't be a political conversation, that this would be a what's in the public interest conversation around our work. But the team has been super nimble and thoughtful about making sure we're going as quickly as we can, and we'll keep you informed as that conversation proceeds. As yet, issues, there was another one here, and President Koba asked about DBE. DBE is the law. We will obey the law. Airport Concessions Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program is the law. If someday it is not, we will comply. But this is really, I would say, a fraught environment. We're going to try to continue to deliver both with our values, but also what's in the public interest. So.
Commissioner Sampath.
Yeah. Again, Curtis, thank you for the framing. It's a helpful framing. And, as you just outline, this is a political risk. So I'm assuming that you, Dave's team, the rest of the organization is aligning the political forces, whether it's airlines, it's us, it's our representatives across both aisles, so that we are in a proactive posture.
We are.
Thank you.
Sure, Johnson.
Two real quick questions. The indexed post completion, I think you talked about it needed to be above 70. What will that index be post completion? Is it just above 70?
It'll be 100.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And the other question, maybe just an accounting question. The mix of federal funding and port funding, from a depreciation perspective, is it the full amount that's depreciated, or is it specific to the port funding?
I believe that'd be the full amount. It's the total asset cost, whether it's port paid or FAA paid.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
That was a great accounting answer from an engineer.
And it is actually correct. Let's be clear about that. And then just for convention purposes, is straight line depreciation.
And legal was behind you as well, not kind of covered. Any other questions? All right, we have a motion, or can I ask for a motion and a second to approve the executive director's recommendation? Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Christina.
Yes, thank you, commissioners. Thank you for all the excellent questions. Really appreciate it. I'm going to ask Grant to come up, and we have another paving project for you. This one is out at Hillsboro, and it has one of the longest project titles that I think maybe you've ever seen, if we can pull the slide up. And the reason is because it is really 3 projects bundled into one. And we did that strategically to minimize operational impact so that we don't have to have the taxiways closed down, minimally as possible, and also to have a larger project that we can put out to bid, which makes it more attractive to more contractors and also for small business participation. So the most interesting part of this project, I think, is the Crossfield Taxiway. We're actually building a new Crossfield Taxiway at Hillsboro. That was one of the key outcomes of our master planning effort out at Hillsboro. So that project has been in planning for a long time and is now coming to fruition. So with that, I will hand it over to Jennifer and also Grant Evenhouse, who is one of our senior managers in engineering and has been involved in building a lot of big projects and complicated projects for the port. So take it away, Jennifer.
All right, next slide. Okay, so this presentation is another request for approval of a public improvement contract to K&E Excavating for approximately $11.2 million for the Hillsboro Airport Taxiway K construction, Taxiway B reconstruction, and exit A5 and B2 runway guard light installation project. The longest title ever. Next slide, please. So here's a map. I'm going to walk you through those different elements. I just want to point out the north arrow at the bottom is kind of diagonal to the left, so we're a little bit shifted diagonally here. The first element is the new Taxiway K that Christina mentioned, that's shown in yellow there. As she mentioned, this is a key outcome of our most recent Hillsboro master plan. It will provide a new connection across the north end of the airfield that will reduce taxi times for pilots and improve efficiency and safety as they move aircraft around the airfield. The second element in blue is reconstruction of existing Taxiway B. That's a important taxiway that parallels our crosswind runway, runway 220, and it provides an important connection to those hangars that you see on the east side of the airfield. And then the third element is installation of safety lighting, where you see the red stars at exits A5 and B2. So you can see on the map, those exits have a straight connection, or we call a direct access from an apron area to a runway. And so installing the safety lighting will provide a visual cue for pilots before they approach the runway to increase awareness. In the future, we'll look at realigning those exits so that they would be making a turn between when they leave the apron, cross the taxiway, and approach the runway. But before we would do that, we want to make sure we know exactly where those should be aligned. And so in the meantime, the safety lighting provides an additional measure of safety until we get to that point. As Christina mentioned, we combined these three different elements into a single contract so that we could minimize operational impacts and have a single contractor managing all the work on the airfield. Pavement work needs to be done in the summer, which is oftentimes the busiest time on the airfield, so it's really important to have that coordinated. Next slide, please. So this slide highlights a lot of the information I just shared with you on that map. But I wanted to point out, like we talked about with Taxiway A, the work on the existing Taxiway B to reconstruct that is something that came out of our pavement management program. Through our monitoring and planning, we determined that that taxiway needs a full depth reconstruction to get the 20-year design life required by FAA. The pavement condition index, or PCI values, on Taxiway B are between 40 and 55. So that's clearly well below that level of 70 that we like to see, and an indication that it's time to do some work there. Next slide. Like the PDX project, this project is also on our 5-year list with FAA for ACIP funding, and it will benefit from the additional funds that have been made available through the bipartisan infrastructure law. So for this project, we anticipate approximately $10.4 million in federal funds, and that leaves the port's share at $6.9 million. I will turn it to Grant.
Thank you, Jennifer. Next slide, please. For the project work areas, as Jennifer mentioned, there's two primary areas, Taxiway K on the left and Taxiway B on the right. For Taxiway K on the left, it's going to be a brand new taxiway. We're cutting across some open grass field there. So that's going to be full depth, getting into the earth below that, into some of the clays there. On Taxiway B, it's going to be removing all of the existing pavement. As Jennifer mentioned, we have very low PCI values there. And then for the two runway guard lights, those will be small trenches cut in that center area you can see there. Next slide, please. For the schedule, the design was completed in 2023 and 2024, and then construction will be completed later this year. And shown in red is the commission action item before you today. Next slide, please. So the contract before you today for $11.2 million is the public improvement contract at the top. Personal services contract for design, that's the design consultant. The electrical pre-purchase was for those long lead items that we needed to get out in front of early. The port staff and contracted services is management, testing, geotechnical work, and then contingencies 10% given the soils out there at Hillsboro. The funding sources, FAA and Port Cost Center. The DBE goal, as you can see, is 15%, and the contractor met it at 15.12%. Next slide, please. With that, the staff requests approval of the executive director recommendation.
Thank you. Commissioner Luther.
Thank you. I'm just curious, introducing a cross runway entry seems to introduce a new kind of risk or additional risk. I'm just curious whether with a flight school on site and other things, whether there are programmatic safety briefings and considerations that accompany this work or other safety measures that are addressed on site, given you're introducing kind of cross runway risk, I would think, or maybe I'm wrong. So anybody who could give me some insight on that would be great.
Yeah, ironically, this is actually going to improve some of the safety just for where the planes generally touch down in the area, and then allowing them to kind of take a more preferred taxiway, as well as getting people all the way from Taxiway A up to Taxiway D a little more out of the way. But Dan, I'm not sure if you want to add anything on that.
Well, I mean, we can be very specific on the safety aspects of it. I can arrange a briefing on that, but I think the whole point here is to prevent those aircraft from having to do that long taxi all the way around. So it actually shortens a lot of the durations. But anytime you're crossing a runway is a safety issue at an airport, whether it's PDX, Troutdale, et cetera. And this is all worked out, the design to meet FAA standards. We don't get to just put things where we want to. It's all part of the national program.
Any other questions? Commissioner Johnson.
Yeah, just maybe a general question. Do we hold the contingency at the project level, or is it centrally held?
Project level.
Okay. And is that maybe a better way than holding it at a central level?
I'm not sure if Antoinette wants to answer. But
one of the things we've talked about is coming back with on a project basis, both revisiting and describing our DBE efforts so that folks know how those standards are set, but also the contingency. And our policy has been, our structure has been, Commissioner, to have it on a project basis and to have it on a risk-based assertion. So an uncertain, far-out project might have a higher, a 40% contingency, but on a project like this, where we understand the soils and the site pretty well, has a relatively low contingency. But we are, do you want to touch on that? But I guess what I'd like to do is put a pin in this a little bit, and I welcome your response, but I know we would like to come back, especially for commissioners who haven't been here for a longer period, so that they can see how our assertions and assumptions are made.
The reason we hold it at the project level is because of the governance structure we have. And so as the project goes through the gates that Sean was describing earlier, the contingency changes as risks and design come out, and it goes down usually. And so when that contingency is provided to the project, they know what it's for. If it goes out of bounds, like something else comes up, whatever, they're required to come back into the governance process for additional funding or to use the funding for something different. So I think because of our controls, we feel very comfortable with it at the project level.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, can I have a motion and a second to approve the executive director's recommendation? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Dan Pippinger will introduce our last item.
I'm not going to compete for the longest title. I'm going to go for the shortest. Let's buy some buses.
Yes, I like it.
Good morning again, commissioners. This is a request to purchase 18 shuttle buses that we use for the economy and employee lots. Last year alone, these buses transported 2.5 million people back and forth from our facilities. And as part, you've heard all about the capital program, right? This is an asset management play. And we deferred purchasing buses twice during the pandemic because of uncertainty and the low passenger volumes. So now we're back to those volumes. We need to replace these buses. And we also really evaluated how we would power these buses. And we have chosen a renewable diesel solution for these buses, mainly to help us on our path to net zero carbon emissions in 2050, and also to give us real resilience in how we power the buses. We had a real challenge during one of our big ice storms because we were using compressed natural gas, and there are very few places to get compressed natural gas in Portland. And so it's not just an asset renewal, it's not just an environmental play, but it's also making sure we can always have some kind of fuel to get people where they need to get to in adverse weather conditions or supply chain disruptions and things like that. So here to present the item is Sarah Souders, the Aviation Development Manager, and Brian Freeman, Engineering Senior Manager.
Thank you. And we're saving the best for last. As Dan mentioned, we're here for buses. So Brian and I are here to request your approval to award an equipment procurement contract to Gillig LLC for the Economy and Employee Shuttle Bus Replacement Project in approximately $12.2 million. Next slide. And next slide. So PDX has a fleet of 24 shuttle buses to transport people between the economy and employee parking lots and the PDX terminal. We have a programmatic approach to replacing these shuttle buses. It's driven by asset renewal. Things we look at are current mileage and annual maintenance costs. And at the time of replacement, these buses usually average 500,000 miles each. They are driven a lot. This project will procure 18 renewable diesel shuttle buses to replace 18 existing CNG buses. And as Dan had mentioned, as we looked at fuel options, renewable diesel was selected for operational resilience due to not having a single source of fuel. Renewable diesel is also viewed as a cleaner fuel option. Tier 4 diesel buses emit 11% less fine particulates than a CNG bus, and R99 provides additional air toxins reductions as well. And I'll hand it over to Brian for the contract piece.
Thanks, Sarah. Good morning, Commissioners. Next slide, please. Pretty straightforward. We're going to fabricate, factory inspect, and deliver 18 35-foot shuttle buses. They're going to be produced by Gillig LLC in California, and they're going to also provide on-site training for maintenance and operators. Next slide. The red diamond shows where we are today, the commission action, and it's going to take a little over a year and a half to manufacture and deliver and do the equipment and training. So this project will start immediately as we need the buses replaced immediately. Next slide. Here is the budget with the equipment procurement contract at the top of $12 million. The port staff for the inspection as well as the contracted services getting the work done. The contingency at $812,000 is approximately 6%. So back to the same question. It's reasonable for this scope of work at this time. The funding source is the Port Cost Center. The equipment is being purchased through a cooperative agreement through Department of Transportation in the state of Washington. There is no small business goal within that cooperative agreement for the procurement of equipment. At that point, though, Gillig LLC, they have their own 0.8%, so which is reasonable for a manufacturer of a bus. That's from suppliers and equipment. They're building the buses, doing the work on floor. Next slide. Staff recommends approval of the executive director recommendation.
Any questions? Commissioner Nemi.
Thanks. I think I understand that the drivers of the buses are represented by a union, and I'm curious how they've been engaged in this process of determining the new equipment and what training would be involved for them in using the new equipment.
I did not expect that question. They are always involved with the maintenance team as they're going through their discussions on how the equipment's operating, doing the daily logs and all of that. So they had the discussions that we're replacing kind for kind, and they actually appreciate that.
Just to interject, I think you had mentioned something about some time for training once the buses arrive too.
Oh, yes.
Correct?
Yeah, they will be here to train for whatever changes are on how the equipment operates with the CNG and the diesel, and then also for the maintenance staff, what the changes in the maintenance program on the vehicles and all of that. Answer it?
I hear you speaking about the maintenance team. I'm talking about somebody who drives the bus.
Oh, yeah,
right?
the operators.
Like, do you know?
Operators
yeah,
as well
so,
will be trained on how to operate.
but they weren't engaged in like what equipment or any of those changes over, it sounds like.
Yeah, right.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner, I can answer a little bit. We contract with SP Plus to provide services, and we have not asked our vendor what buses they think we should buy. We will engage the drivers in training and make sure they're familiar with the equipment and handle any issues that they bring up, but we did not consult them on what bus we should buy.
Mr. Strader.
I have a couple of questions. One is you kind of covered why we went away from natural gas into the renewable diesel. Did we look at electric as well? I know it's kind of the determination's already been made, but just the functional cost over a period of time. And the second question would be is what is the overall fleet size? Is this the replacement of the fleet in its entirety? And what do we expect the life cycle to be versus natural gas?
So I can start with the life cycle. So our fleet size is 24 right now. We're replacing 18 with the R99, so we will have the remaining 6 for CNG, and we'll keep that balance for right now. And then the life cycle is still the same for 10 to 12 years is how long we keep a bus into service. First question.
The first question is, do we look at electric vehicles too, just because of the extended life? And I know there's some extra cost and there's a limited amount of resources as far as who you can go to get these manufactured, but.
That's correct. So last year we completed a zero emissions study that did both electric and hydrogen. At the conclusion of that and the time that we need to replace these buses, we're just not ready infrastructure-wise, timing-wise, to go electric or hydrogen. Hydrogen is still being developed in our area, so that's obviously an option in the future that we're still looking into, as well as electric. There's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be put into place, as well as the buses are a lot heavier, and our pavement will need to be redesigned and built heavier as well. So there's a lot of factors that we need to get into place that we'll continue to reevaluate. Pacific Power, we've also identified, does not have enough electricity where our buses currently park and will need to be charged. So an additional study will have to be done with Pacific Power to see what kind of needs and how we can get that electricity to where we need to go. So as we continue to replace buses in the future, we'll continue to reevaluate our options and what makes the best decision for the port moving forward.
Great comprehensive answer. Thank you.
Commissioner Johnson.
Yeah, just the renewable diesel, did we need additional infrastructure to manage that? Where is it going to be stored, or is it going to be delivered to where the buses logistically sit?
So don't quote me on the percentage, but most all of maintenance's equipment right now already runs off of R99, so it's not new to us. So this is actually a benefit to having one less component for maintenance to operate, but it's been around for quite some time, and so there's no new infrastructure needed.
And Sarah, maybe just note if it's not available.
Yes, worst case scenario, if it's not available and we come into another weather hazard like we did with the CNG last winter, we can fuel at any regular fuel station and go with just diesel.
Gotcha.
So that's our worst case that we wouldn't want to do, but that is also an operational resilience piece that we have taken into account.
This is a fun side note that this weather event, we ended up, I want to say Waste Management supplied our CNG. We were in pretty dire straits where both of our sources of CNG couldn't access the airport. So we had to do a little side deal with Waste Management to deliver short-term CNG to keep our bus fleet going. So this is not only renewable R99, but also has a backup, which is you can always load in traditional diesel.
Right. And I think maybe the final question, you talked about some of the barriers of entry for electrification, but hydrogen, is it just there's not enough infrastructure, and did we not consider maybe an on-site generation?
That was part of the study. The technology just isn't here in the Pacific Northwest yet. If I'm correct, the buses have not been developed in a 35-foot bus. TriMet, I believe, has committed to going with a certain percentage of hydrogen buses in the future. As well as Daimler is talking about putting in a hydrogen charger station, fueling station. It's just not readily available in the Pacific Northwest quite yet, and it's coming. So I think that's going to be the options moving forward. Is definitely doing future studies, and I believe Environmental is doing a hydrogen study this year that should be complete in December.
Perfect. Thank you.
Commissioner Devon.
This is just a question of clarification. Are we taking all delivery of all 18 at once, or they're being phased in over the course of the timeline that you showed us?
They will be taken in all at once.
Any other questions? The moral of the story is if you're flying tomorrow afternoon, be prepared to walk from the economy lot to the airport. That's not good.
Come early.
Come early.
Yeah, exactly. Dan's like, why is she? Yeah. Sorry, Dan. Can I get a motion and a second on the executive director's recommendation?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. The real moral of the story is be safe in the next few days, and good luck to the airport and the great staff, as they always do such a terrific job of getting us through inclement weather. All right, everybody. Take care. Happy Valentine's Day. Happy Black History Month. We'll see you next month. Meeting's adjourned.